Um, I had a high school teacher who used to say to my friends, so I'm not sure this was very ethical pedagogy, but he would say to my friends, his other students, um, do you ever find that Jonathan goes on and on and on, and he sort of goes around the topic and around the issue before he actually gets to the point? Well, bad habits die hard. And since you were so generous, A, to invite me, but also to support the book, what I thought I would do is try to bring some of these divergent ideas together. Obviously, a focus on teaching and learning and AI. I am not an AI expert. If you want to leave now, you may. Um, but also rooted in some of the ideas facing our sector, facing higher education, drawn from some of the ideas in the new book. Um, would you be okay if I come down? Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again. Thrilled to be here and delighted that Seton Hall is an ACUE partner. This is not a canned speech, so try to tailor it to the audience, but it's not a canned speech. So if we hit some bumps along the way, I will appreciate your grace. Um, I did think I would start with a little bit of biography. Right after college, I did go to South Africa. It was pretty heady years in 1995, 6, 7, 8. Mandela had just been elected in 94. Yes, uh, looking a little too missionary, I think, but those were my charges, my amazing students in the dorm that I managed along with my teaching duties at Tiger Kloof School. Um, as we're at a denominational institution, a little history here. Tiger Kloof was founded by the London Missionary Society, which was the society which launched uh, Robert Moffat, David Livingstone. Robert Moffat translated the Bible, the entire Bible, into Setswana, the language, the dominant language in that region, an extraordinary impact on that part of the world. And they founded this extraordinary school, Tiger Kloof. You can see here our school block. Um, the school had an adults trades program in the year, so the students built the church. Talk about building the church. Um, but I share it because being here at Seton Hall, like Tiger Kloof, we had a strong sense of spirit, and that really guided our work. We opened every school day with prayer, church on Wednesdays and Sundays, and it was an important part of the life of the place. And that vision came from my mentor, an extraordinary educator who passed last year. His name was David Matthews. Sounds like the singer Dave Matthews. It's not a coincidence. David was Dave's uncle. And David was very insistent. He would say, "You may have heard of my more famous nephew, but I'm the original." Um, Talk about an extraordinary life. He founded two of the world's, I think the world's, not just the continents or Southern Africa's, two of the world's great schools. In the 70s, right after Botswana got its independence, um, he was invited to create a world renowned secondary school, Maruapula. And then he was part of the team that reopened Tiger Kloof after the apartheid government had shut it down. And that's when I got to know him and learn from him. But he had this extraordinary perspective of a private school and the public service. Sounds obvious when you see it on the screen, but he really took it to heart. Maruapula was a private school, but very committed to its mission of creating a new democracy, Botswana. And Tiger Kloof, where I taught, that's our dining hall there, was a weird mix because teachers were provided by the school district, uh, curriculum. We took the matriculation exams to graduate students onto college, but it was private property and had some private support and extracurriculars that were provided. So this lovely hybrid between public and private activity, but all in the public service for the public good. Well, now you can imagine me. I'm 24, 25, on the adventure of a lifetime and getting a chance to be inspired and learn from some pretty amazing educators. Uh, that notion was so discordant to how I would think about things, right? We think, well, this is private and this is public, and never the twain shall meet. And Seton Hall is private, and that's important for vision, mission, operations. We're now public. Public is Montclair State down the road, right? But it didn't make full sense given these experiences that I had. And I had spent some time working in the early days of the charter school movement. And well, what's a charter school? Is that public? Is that private? And I think the Supreme Court is going to decide, at least in terms of institutionally, in this current session. But it got me thinking that, sure, we can think of the world and the issues as a matter of apples and oranges. But we also know that there are really tart apples and really sweet apples, and there are really sweet oranges and really tart citrus fruit. All this to say, what if we start to think about these issues as a matter of degree instead of a matter of kind? That some things can be more publicly purposed or more privately purposed on a spectrum of publicness. 20 years in the thinking and a few more in the writing, playing with this idea of publicness and privateness as it pertains to education led to the book. Delighted to share copies with you today. Thank you very much, Seton and team. You don't have to read it because here's the punchline. If we think of what makes something more public and less private, what the book argues is we need to reduce exclusion, right? Where are our economists in the room? Yeah, okay. What is your name, sir? Kurt. So Kurt will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in print, so I hope you don't. That the classical definition of what makes something a private good is that it's excludable, right? I can exclude it from you. It's also non-rivalrous, but we won't get into the weeds. It's excludable, and that makes it private. If it's not excludable, it is more public. And now we're on that spectrum. Now we're thinking as a matter of degree instead of a matter of kind. Well, how might we reduce exclusion in what we do as educators, as an institution, and be more publicly purposed? And then the second part of the definition is that as schools, we prepare public goods. And the classic public good work of education has been historically to prepare citizens, people who can participate in the economy, workers, good neighbors, shared norms. That's been a classic historical purpose of schooling. And in the book, I've added a fourth big public good: stewards of the planet. So without a democracy, an economy, society, and a planet, we're in trouble. And so to emphasize the publicness of schooling, we try to reduce exclusion and support the next generation in these four big public good ways. Okay, now you're remembering my high school teacher who said, Jonathan, where are you going with all this? Well, yes, that is Linda Richmond. If you know Linda Richmond from Saturday Night Live. The beginning of the year, I took some of those ideas and did a little treatment of higher ed and put a piece in Inside Higher Ed. You see the title, Higher Ed is not a public good, the small print, but it could be. And I'm not sure I got as many converts as I wanted. The piece was timed for the big AACNU conference, and the theme of that conference was reemphasizing higher ed as a public good. Be that as it may. And if you remember the Saturday Night Live character Linda Richmond, she would pose these statements. Discuss. Higher ed is not public, it's not good, discuss. It's neither public nor is it good, discuss. And that's really where the piece went as a push on our sector. So let's take them in each part, the public and then the good. If we operationalize this notion of exclusion, what the book calls an exclusion test, and we start looking for exclusionary practices, practices that make something more privately purposed than publicly purposed, we really can start to find it all over higher ed as an industry. Maybe it's not fair to pick on Harvard this week because of the billions of threatened lost dollars, but I think it's fair to say when we think of the most exclusive in American higher ed, well, Harvard's right up there. Very different from a place with a mission and an open access, non-exclusive mission and vision, like just down the street, Essex County College, also an ACUE partner. We're thrilled to be working with their faculty. But in the piece, I don't just stop at admission. Certainly selectivity is where exclusion is clearest. Cost can exclude. Curriculum and curriculum choices can exclude. Scheduling, if I just can't take something because it's at this time of day and for this reason but not these reasons. The culture of an institution, who completes, and also the societal benefits that come with who completes and or are excluded from those benefits. And governance. Do we govern behind closed doors, or do we consider ourselves more open to stakeholders in governance? To me, this notion of exclusivity is at the heart of a lot of what the sector is facing. And I've given this talk a few times now. Sure, the opposite is what's under attack. DEI, and we know what the I is in the DEI, the opposite of exclusivity. But I think it's this sense of, as a sector, we've become exclusive only for some Americans, is driving some of the politics around what we're facing and what we're up against. And to put some data next to that, you may know recent Gallup data showing only a third of Americans having a lot of confidence in higher ed, another third only having some, and another third having little to no confidence in higher ed. That's 2/3 of the populace. That's not a winning coalition in any political sense or otherwise. Our graduation rates give a sense of exclusion, with today only about 2/3 of students in baccalaureate programs graduating in 6 years, and only about 1/3 of students in an associate's program graduating or entering a transfer system where the data is a hot mess. So we just don't know. And another data point from the National Clearinghouse, only 2.6% of students who stopped out, that polite phrase we use for dropout, came back last year. So that is a very low win-back return rate. Altogether, I think it makes the argument for how do we emphasize our publicness, our public purposes, even as private institutions. We're still going to be private legally, but can we help to restore confidence and support and faith in what we do by taking down these barriers that create exclusivity? The upside of this slide, when my sons were applying for college recently, I went into Navigance, this great tool you may know, and I'm sure you perform very well on Navigance. But just for fun, I entered least selective, highest graduation rate. Right, so least selective, these are not exclusive places, but boy, are they doing a great job with students because they've got the highest graduation rates. And guess who they were? The denominational schools, like those that are part of ACCU and other denominational institutions with your strong sense of mission and purpose and student focus. So kudos to the Seton Hall and the Seton Halls of the world. Okay, so Linda Richmond, higher ed is neither public nor good. We discuss the public part. Is it good? Well, here are three titles that I draw on a lot. Our friend Jonathan Zimmerman, just before COVID 2020, he's a historian out of Penn, published the first ever history of college teaching, first ever book-length history of college teaching. And his title says it all, not amateur in a low-quality sense, because there are great college teachers, but amateur in the sense of we do this work out of love, given that how higher ed is incentivized, organized, how Ph.D. training occurs by and large. Most professors don't have that opportunity to become great teachers, and as he describes it in the book, no standards of professional practice. Similarly, in the middle, and for those of you who can read the fine print, if you don't believe Corbin Campbell, you can believe me because I wrote the foreword. Corbin got this phenomenal Spencer Foundation grant to visit 700 classrooms with a team of trained observers against a validated observational tool of teaching, the first ever observational large N study of college teaching, and bright spots here and there, but overall, she had the courage to write, and here she's a sitting professor at American University, middling quality. Despite the fact, now in its third volume, the famous Pascarella text around how college affects students, despite lots of evidence to believe that when there's great teaching, students do better, are more engaged, have more civic aptitudes, have moral orientations and development, you name it. Now, those stats I mentioned earlier come from a lot of reasons, right? Cost, culture, access, you name it. But we have enough data now to know that when the teaching is good, students do much better and retention is up. And so this is a critical piece of the puzzle. That's the piece you're committed to. It's part of the culture here. It's what we've been working on at ACUE for for 10 years. Invite you to the pinning ceremony coming up May 12th. Can I invite everybody? Everybody, you're all, come on back. May 12th, the next class of Seton Hall professors who will earn their ACUE certification. Well, what the heck does that mean if you're unfamiliar with it? We said, let's define those standards. Let's look at the literature, let's work with the experts and define what every college professor should know and be able to do to teach well, full stop. Just like if you're a quantitative reacher, you need to know and be able to do stata and your methods and what have you. This is the foundation of practice for great teaching. So standards, courses that are aligned to those standards that are, you've told us, respectful, collegial, helpful, relevant, leading to a certification. So that's a different idea from a workshop or a consultation, but something that matters. And boy, maybe that was a little audacious to say 10 years ago, but today your colleagues and you are part of a community of 50,000 professors nationwide who are ACUE certified. Given typical teaching loads, that's probably about 3 million students who are getting a better classes, a better education. Okay, John Vernon was the high school teacher who said, can you get to the advertised point of this thing? That includes, what is generative AI? What are effective prompts? How do I write effective prompts? How do I leverage it to develop course resources? How do I use it, but also make sure I'm creating the human experiences when I don't want an AI experience? And then also the ethical component. What is the responsible use, knowing the known biases that we learn more every day? I think if there was a theme to this, Joe, we were chatting about this before. This is a tool. It's the latest tool in our toolbox. So how do we, A, understand what that tool is, use it in creative ways, and still maintain an ethical code with our students, an honorable code with our students? If you use it, disclose it. You use the tool, great. Did you say, as I say to my own students, did you tell AI to do your homework for you? Okay, well, please disclose that. Versus, did you use AI to help take your English, which may not be your first language, up to standard English so that you can better communicate your own ideas and we can engage in those ideas? Disclose that. That sounds like a perfectly appropriate, and particularly if it's disclosed, ethical use of the tool. But it's a tool. So I've got 2 more slides, then we'll do some Q&A. But back to this idea of publicness. Can teaching be more public and less private? And I think the answer is absolutely yes, and it's what we've been advocating and helping professors develop for years now. The degree to which something is relevant, the degree to which the choices I've made in this course, in this syllabus design, why this textbook, why this kind of assessment, being transparent in those ways makes my choices as an educator less private. Right? I'm not keeping anything for you, I'm explaining it. You are not excluded from the decisions around my pedagogy. We know that kind of relevance and transparency is motivating to students. Similarly, when we make choices and when we teach in ways that are participatory and social, we're not saying, hey, this knowledge is just for my eager students or for the dominant talkers that I can lean on in every class. We're going to try to get everybody into this community in a very non-exclusionary way. The social bit of it, I think, is actually deeply philosophical, right? We agree what is knowledge together, right? We decided, communities of practice and experts, that this is where the evidence and the argument and the theory leads us today until the facts change or our perspectives change. But simply knowledge creation is a social activity, not excluding some points of view. Divergent points of view have to defend themselves with evidence and argument and persuasive, but they're not excluded from the social nature of learning and with each other and teaching. I think it also does what the tech tools can't do, right? Let the tech tools do what what they can. Don't be afraid if they are taking away from you things that you've done for a long time. You probably should have stopped doing them a long time ago, because what it frees us up is to focus on what the book talks about is an intellectual, emotional paradigm, what we can only do as human beings together, make meaning together, to create our intellectual and social worlds together. And that's where I'd like to at least close these prefatory remarks. Um, I think when we take this frame of trying to remove exclusion uh, and create more human interactions and using the tools, we're setting up the conditions for greater human flourishing. Um, that's a picture of my students. We had one class online. It was a great opportunity to take a picture, whether it's online or in person. And I thought I would give David the last word, a humble man, a believer in humanity and other people, and really seeing education as for to create more flourishing among all of us. So thank you. There are no questions. Any questions? No question. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Any questions? Thank you so much. And I really love your slide design. I took photos of the slides because I liked how you presented it. But thank you.
Okay.
The most important part, the design. But in today's times, I mean, it's scary to open New York Times app because, like, God knows what's happening every 30 seconds. But this idea of publicness and privateness of colleges and universities, I think, is coming front and center, like with protests and things like that. So just in the era that we're living in, if you could talk a little bit more about like what's happening at Columbia, and they've had to close a public space for fear that, you know, more violence and things like that are going to happen. It's happening at UC San Diego. I just traveled with a woman who's the vice chancellor there, and she said her campus was a mess with public-private issues that are going on. Just if you could comment about it in the context of today's times. Not sure if you touch upon that in your book at all.
No, thank goodness. The book was.
It was published before this.
Exactly. The classic author's line published before. You know, Columbia is a hard case because it symbolizes so much more and its own history and its location in the media market. What I'd love to do, and I have permission, is answer the question from my son's perspective. So my son goes to SUNY Purchase. We are thrilled. He's in the Technical Theater Conservatory. He's getting this phenomenal hands-on education in studio, 5-6 hours a day. He loves it. Mad skills. If you ever need a bookshelf built, I'll give you my number, his number. They had a protest. Now, one perspective, but he's not a radical. And he didn't participate in the encampment, but like a true techie, he was like teching the encampment, like on walkie-talkies with the organizers of the encampment. Best I can tell, they were within the time, manner, and place protections of constitutionally protected speech, particularly on public property, state property, when you know that standard of free speech is even stronger than speech than you can rightly allow. Um, as you may have seen in the news, state troopers in riot gear were called in, and they put art students into the vans and arrested them all. And again, by his reporting at 10 p.m., silent hour, it was eerily silent. Um, so I don't know. I don't want to put anybody in a sticky wicket here. That would be a David Matthews expression. But even though private institutions on private property have a different zone of freedom and action, to what extent does this community, as a community in conversation, want to uh, define, redefine, recommit to that zone, right? And do the time, manner, place uh, commitments that public property have? How much is that in keeping with the public purpose of an institution like Seton Hall? I'm not advocating it, I'm not recommending it, I'm just posing it as a way, if we think about our public commitments versus our private abilities, where do we come down on that?
Oh,
Yeah.
so I'll go ahead and ask a question. So your talk made me think that about this public-private divide and exclusionary. And I was struck by the extent to which much of the things that higher education is going through now, are tied to the notion that higher education is a public good, right? That the government has and society has an interest in the outcomes and what is occurring at these institutions. Um, and that there seems to be this strange, almost counterintuitive uh, connection between how exclusionary the institution is, right? The more exclusionary it is, the more prestigious it is, and the more society seems to think it has an interest in running that institution, right? So, um, Harvard being the best example of this at this point, right? As you said, the most exclusionary institution, and so in some ways, perhaps the least public of all goods, right, Kirk? Um, a, a, a private institution for over 300 years, and yet obviously the federal government seems to be taking an awfully detailed interest in what is occurring there. And so, how do you reconcile those two things?
I think it's the entanglement, right? There are billions at stake, we've learned. Um, as a political scientist, I'm obligated to say, um, what is the democratic interest in how those dollars are spent, right? Because otherwise, for us just to say, hey, give us your money, leave us alone, we know what we're doing, feels almost authoritarian on our side. That now it's an authority of expertise, maybe in some cases, um, but it's still authoritarian in a way. Uh, it does feel as if the jig is up of um, self-governing through accreditation. Yeah, it's a 200, 250-year tradition, but not in light of the outcomes. Now, those aren't the Harvard outcomes because they're so darn selective. They're going to graduate 99% of their students anyway. Um, maybe the answer is just simple. This is not about on the merits. This is politics, pure power politics on an easy target that Richard Hofstadter wrote about, the anti-intellectualism that we can date to our founding.
thinking about it interested because, I was in the sort of counterfactual. It's sort of hard to imagine is because you mentioned the amount of money the government has at stake here, and so I think the sort of thought experiment that's hard to do because of the way higher education has evolved in the United States is would would there be as much interest in Harvard if there was less money at stake? And I sort of think the answer is yes. Although, of course, I can't prove that really because all of these institutions have immense amount of federal dollars being poured into them. But I don't think it's the federal dollars that have gotten the public interested in Harvard. I think that just happens to be a useful tool for the government to use. And so it does, it does sort of, what is our investment as an institution, as a country, and as a public entity have in what private institutions are doing, particularly in one that is, supposedly, wedded to the free market and allowing institutions to, govern themselves through that mechanism.
Yeah, maybe part of the answer, and I've written about this elsewhere, is what I think is the double whammy of globalization not playing out the way um, the globalists and um, supporters of NAFTA and the Clinton go-go 90s had hoped, coupled with a legitimate interest in higher ed to look around rooms and tables and say, gosh, there are all kinds of perspectives and stories and histories and ways of knowing not at this table. And if we're in the ways of knowing business, uh, let's hear what those different perspectives and contexts and histories have. So that created what we know now is the non-college educated voting bloc, which was very strong in 2000 and was even larger in 24 or 2020 and 2024. So to what extent are we complicit in the effects of globalization and the belief in that economic rationale? There will be replacement, good jobs will be replaced, hasn't happened yet, and our focus on the other and how that's been used over the years.
Thank you. Unlike all of the other persons here, I'm not a college professor, but a retired high school principal, secondary in New Jersey with 40 years of experience. And listening to your presentation today leads me to think that we in the United States always seem to have to reinvent the wheel with education, that we're the ones who have to come up with the answers. And as I look at this, I see two things. I see a vertical integration and a horizontal integration of education. For in the United States, our public institutions, that's K-12 as opposed to higher education, there's a real separation here. And New Jersey is a prime example. I don't know if you are aware, but New Jersey is the most segregated public school system in the entire nation, if you are well aware of that. And the reason for that is that we in New Jersey separate our public education by geographical boundaries. For instance, we're here in South Orange Maplewood School District, and if we walk 100 yards away, we're in the Newark Public School System. But heaven forbid that a child in the Newark Public School System would want to go to South Orange Maplewood Public Schools. They couldn't do that because it's restricted. And so we have that exclusion in our state, which is detrimental to the child's education. My question is that the British system, which you are familiar with because your son goes to St. Andrews, the British system does not recognize public-private in the sense that no child can go to a private school. They can. State monies are used to finance private schools, religious schools, whether it's the Anglican or Catholic Church, no problem. And there's no boundary line. You just simply have to get admitted to that school if there's a seat available. And it works so effectively. And if you look at the test scores that were recently published by the New Jersey Department of Education in literary arts and the math scores, most recently, that's 2 weeks ago, they're horrible. The math scores are absolutely horrible. The literary arts score, the language arts scores, oh, they're a little bit better. But we need to take a look, not introspectively, but we need to look at other school systems in the world. The British system, university education as well, is much better. Why do we not look there as an answer to our problems here in this country? We look within, not without, to see that there are solutions there, especially on the K-12 areas. And I'm sure that all of you have experienced in your classrooms because you are teaching the students who are coming out of the public schools, and you see the horrible math and the writing skills that they have that are horrible. And you're questioning, well, what are those teachers doing down there in the public schools? As a secondary high school principal, my faculty used to complain, what are those elementary school teachers doing? Because they're terrible when they come to the high school. I don't know the answer, but we collectively need to get together and have a hardcore discussion about what is best for our children, K to postgraduate education.
Well, I appreciate you putting a lot of red meat on the table. The book, although has very applicable ideas to higher ed, is very much a retrospective of my first career in K-12. I will say it is oddly more popular on the right than it is on the left, which I didn't expect because it is written as an antidote to privatization, right? Where we only care about what's good for my child and my family. There's a sentence in the book about publicization is about caring as much about what we share as what we keep to ourselves. So it's not about state control, it's not about nationalization, it's about this philosophical orientation. Do we care about what we share as much as we care about what we keep to ourselves? I think, Joe, the left is unhappy and has, I can tell, I know, intentionally ignored it because it takes this notion of exclusion and puts the existing K-12 system under a microscope. Same example you used. If I live on one side of a politically drawn line, I have access to a better resource school or a less well-resourced school. The less well-resourced school may still have better actual pedagogy and curriculum in teaching and learning. So let's not judge resources as the only measure, but it's certainly an important measure. I would direct you, I taught it this week. Louis Menand has an amazing review in the New Yorker about a new book about the desegregation lawsuit in the 70s in Detroit and why the Supreme Court knocked it down. It's in the April 5th issue, Louis Menand. And he's got a great line in there. He says the Supreme Court has treated school district boundaries like mini states with the sovereign power of mini states. And that's from the highest court in the land. So if we want to remove exclusion, what practical opportunities do we have? To what extent can we understand the choice movement as a way to pierce the membrane of school districts? Now, it's come about in a way that's been about markets, competition, all false assumptions that have been slavishly applied. I'm looking at our economist friend to a production of a public good. I think we could have a great conversation about how those underlying assumptions did not hold, do not hold. But that's different from thinking about Tiger Kloof being committed to the public good, or Maruapula, or in the UK, where the legal status of the school is less important than its purposes. Last thing, UK is tricky because you've got a religiously homogenous society by and large. You don't have the diversity of creed or non-creed that you have here. And that adds an important thing to consider.
Thank you. Uh, you mentioned public's opinion of higher education, a third, a third, a third, with one third having a positive view. Do you know what those statistics were a generation or two ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago, it was, uh, I believe, a majority in support, right up there with police, hospitals, higher ed, strong support um, for higher ed. I'm pretty sure. Give it 50, give it five more, 15. But I think it syncs up. And look, this is not my area of research. I'm sure people have written papers about it. How well does it line up with NAFTA and real offshoring and the social contract between what we do and there's going to be a better opportunity for you at the end, and whether or not that social contract has been upheld? I think through no fault of our own, but clearly we've been made complicit in the breaking of that contract.
Hi, thank you for the great, talk today. And I have a question about, the development. What do you think of the development of the assessment strategies for college students, given that nowadays AI can produce essays, codes, even lab results or report for students? So, what do you think of the future of the assessment for students?
Well, we chatted a little bit about this when we were prepping for this session. This is such a rapidly evolving story. Um, what do we do as scholars in the face of a rapidly changing situation where the evidence and the data is moving, right? What is our appropriate posture when those are the circumstances? Certainly not certitude, it's not knowledge. I can only speak to my personal views teaching at Columbia. There appears to be no policy, lots of individualized academic freedom. And I say to my students, I don't want to interact with a computer's ideas. I want to interact with your ideas. And I'm really trying to deepen this relational sense of learning, um, the trust and the integrity. I know those are old fashioned words, but the trust and integrity that this is your work. Effort in, learning out. If you don't put the effort in, you're not going to learn. That's not my problem. Now, I think it does become an institution's problem if somebody has the degree, AI did 4 years of work, they show up at a job or in their community or at the election box, and they can't think straight about anything. That's going to reflect poorly on the degree. But trying to police it, my goodness, we don't want to be police officers. We want to be inspirers of minds. So let me ask you back, follow up to you. Do you think your students, I suspect, at a Catholic institution, notion of honor, integrity, uh, get you pretty far down the road or not?
So, could you reframe the
Yeah, the question
questions?
is,
Yeah.
to what extent do you think you can solve for this with your students on the basis of honor and integrity and your relationship with them?
I think I agree with you that it's so hard to, I mean, even we want to be a police man to, to, assess students and keep track of what they're doing. It's just so hard. But we also don't want students to miss the opportunity to benefit from the development of AI and how to use it as a tool for them in the future.
Totally.
But for the faculty members, how to balance between, having the students learn how to use the tool. But in the meantime, they have the foundation knowledge to judge what is correct, what is not correct using AI, because AI can produce wrong or mistaking information. And if the student don't have the foundation to make the judgment, they they can.
Totally. So I mean, you've put two great topics on the table. One is just how do we make sure we have some academic integrity, right? You say this is your work, it's your work, great. The other sounds much more philosophical about the tool itself. When does the wisdom of the crowd, the large language wisdom, helpful, right? Because it's not just one professor's feedback, it is the wisdom of a discipline, it's the wisdom of large numbers. Same time, do they know and are you teaching them about known biases already so that they are correcting for the tool? And at the same time, new ideas are the outlier. I don't think any large language model is ever going to, perhaps by design, unless it's programmed that way, look to the outlier for new insight, new discovery. And my goodness, that is our business, not what's at the mean, what's at the very tail of the distribution. So here's the question I'll leave you with: to what extent? And look, I have two undergrad sons. These are hard stuff for grown-up adults. I almost said grown-A adults, but my Catholic upbringing won't let me. Are we teaching about epistemology? Right? What is it that we consider a fact? And if that is what we as human beings consider to be factual, how does this tool match up to it? And what's the difference between fact and belief? I mean, what Thomas Aquinas tried to reconcile between the Christian world and the classical world, we're not done reconciling that. Are they being prepared to engage with that debate? Well, thank you so much. As I said, was not the canned talk about publicization. I tried to bring it home a little bit and to share some biography and also honor my mentor who I lost last year. So thank you so much for indulging me, for inviting me. It's been a real honor. Thank you.